Well, thanks to everyone for being here today. I want to start off by saying on behalf of our Manitoba government that we honor the sacredness and importance of this land and of the ancestors that once walked where we're standing today. The Anishinaabe, the Innuit, the Dene, the Dakota, the Inuit, and the Anishinaabe nations, and the Red River Métis Nation, who paved the way to what is now known as Manitoba, home to all treaty people. Today, our government is releasing Manitoba's public accounts for 24-25, along with our first quarter report for 25-26. When we received MNP's post-election accountability review shortly after we were sworn into government, we committed to being open and transparent with Manitobans. We initiated that review because the previous government left us with a $2 billion deficit, which was confirmed last year at public accounts, and we knew that we needed to do things differently. Flash forward to today. On a year-over-year basis now, the deficit stands at $1.149 billion for fiscal year 24-25, which is a decline of 42%. The deficit is also a $90 million improvement from the third quarter report. And this is driven primarily by savings in health, which has been led by my colleague, the Minister of Health, Seniors and Long-Term Care. I would like to take a moment to discuss two independent items that occurred after the release of the third quarter report and are included in the public accounts for 24-25. The first relates to the tobacco settlement, which you're all familiar with. In Manitoba, like all provinces, received an upfront cash payment, and then as part of the settlement is set to receive annual payments over the next 20 years. The government and the Auditor General had to agree on how long tobacco companies are likely to keep making settlement payments. Different provinces made different guesses. Some said payments could stop right away, and others assumed they'd keep coming for 20 years. With the full support of the Auditor General, we're assuming the companies will keep paying for at least 5 years. This is a careful and cautious approach. As a result, Manitoba is recording a $421 million benefit from the settlement in 24-25. Every single dollar of this will go towards fighting cancer, so more Manitobans can one day hear the words, "You are cancer-free." The second major update since the third quarter report is an increase in contingent liabilities, basically year-end accounting adjustments treated as expenses. These adjustments happen every year, but this year's increase was significant. To quote from the audited annual report and public accounts, if the adjustments related to the tobacco settlement and other year-end adjustments to expenses had not materialized after the 24-25 third quarter forecast, the actual 24-25 deficit would have further improved. So in simple terms, had neither of these two events occurred, we would have seen an improvement to our overall deficit. I'd like to note that the 24-25 public accounts is the first time since 2017 that Manitoba has received a clean audit opinion from the Auditor General. We're following through on our word to be transparent and accountable with Manitobans about how we manage the books. And on that note, I'd like to acknowledge that the final year-end deficit in public accounts is higher than what we originally forecast when we released Budget 2024. But I want to ensure Manitobans that we are making headway in reducing the large deficit that was left to us by the PCs by 42%. I would also like to acknowledge that both Moody's and S&P have recently reaffirmed our credit rating with stable outlooks. So as I mentioned off the top, today we are also releasing our first quarter financial report. Normally, you don't see much in the way of change in Q1 compared to budget. But as you all know, this summer, Manitobans endured one of the worst wildfire seasons in recent memory. Families were displaced, communities were devastated, and 2 Manitobans lost their lives. As a government, we stepped up to respond. I want to acknowledge the hard work of our wildfire service, emergency management, and local leadership in navigating this wildfire season, which is not yet over. From budget to Q1, we saw a $179 million hit to our provincial coffers when it came to wildfire expenses. That number is likely to increase as the invoices do continue to roll in, but these are one-time costs. And like I've said, and the Premier has said, we spared no expense in ensuring the safety of Manitobans. What isn't included in this first quarter report is a future claim we will make under the Federal Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements Program, or the DFAA. This claim, which will be reported as revenue, will help with our bottom line. and will be reflected in later quarterly reports. As the minister responsible for hydro, I'm always hoping for rain, and as you all know, we had a hot and dry summer. This has impacted water levels across Manitoba Hydro's basin, and they are reporting a negative variance of $38 million for their first quarter on actuals basis. While Manitoba Hydro's projected year-end financial results are still subject to variability associated with weather impacts, energy markets, and other external factors, they do anticipate being in a net loss position at the end of the fiscal year. As of the first quarter report, the government has retained its $200 million revenue contingency, which will help to offset the likely reduction in net income that was anticipated at budget from hydro. We are continuing to ensure that hydro has what they need to keep energy rates low for Manitobans while generating new capacity, including 600 megawatts in Indigenous-owned wind that was announced as part of our affordable energy plan. Hydro is something we as Manitobans can be proud of, and if there's one thing that has galvanized our sense of Canadian pride, it's standing up to Donald Trump. As you'll recall, Budget 2025 included what we called a tariff budget that included economic projections if 25% tariffs were introduced across the board, with a retaliatory response. We were potentially looking at a 3.8% hit to our GDP, which would have created a tough recession. However, Manitoba's economy is showing resilience. As of Q1, our GDP is projected to increase by 1.2%, which is slightly lower than what we forecasted in Budget 2025, but also much better than that downside scenario we projected. That's not to say that tariffs haven't caused uncertainty for businesses and workers in our province, but Manitoba is indeed weathering this storm. There are signs of confidence in our province, confidence that families can build their lives here and businesses can grow here. Under the PCs, Manitoba lost healthcare workers, young people left our province, and affordability worsened. Today, we're starting to turn that around. Affordability is one of the top concerns for Manitobans, and make no mistake, the best way to make life more affordable is to grow the economy and protect the services that families count on. Just yesterday, we launched our economic development strategy that will harness our province's potential and sets the ambitious goal of making Manitoba a have province by 2040. That's what this government is focused on: strengthening healthcare, making life more affordable, and building an economy that works for everyone, not just a privileged few. Our government is committed to transparency, accountability, and fairness in how we manage the province's finances. We're charting a new course for Manitoba, one that puts people first, protects what matters most, and builds a stronger future together. Thank you. And with that, we'll open to questions.
Given the fact that the deficits continue to be higher than expected, higher than budgeted, are you still 100% committed to balancing the budget in 2027-28?
We know how important it is for Manitobans to have a government that's fiscally focused, fiscally responsible, and we continue to ensure we deliver on that. We made a firm commitment to deliver a balanced budget in the final year of our mandate, and we're still committed to doing that.
And how do you get there, given that the deficits keep running higher? There are a number of factors that you've mentioned. Most of the change seems to come on the expense side, and we in the public haven't really seen any clear indication of controlling those expenses. We in the media have asked for concrete examples of directives to departments to cut spending or vacancy management or something. We haven't been given anything. So given that expenses keep running over budget, what concretely are you doing to keep expenses in line so that you can meet your target, which is now a steeper climb?
Well, for this year, for Q1, we're reporting in terms of a variance on the expense side is really just pertaining to wildfires. So we're not reflecting changes in our fundamental overall operational costs or expenses for Q1. The overage that we're saying is mainly driven by wildfire expenses, which, as you know, are one-time costs and are related to the worst wildfire season we've had in 30 years. As it relates to how we're going to get there, I think we showed some really important progress last year. You can see that relative to what we reported at Q3, we showed a $90 million improvement and that was driven by reductions in healthcare costs. And I think that's a great example of how government shows that we can both reduce costs while we continue to invest. And so we reduced those healthcare expenditures last fiscal by $90 million after our Q3 report out. And we did that while we continued to invest in staffing up and improving the state of healthcare in Manitoba. So I think that shows that as a government, we're able to both invest while we make sure we do the important work of remaining fiscally sustainable.
I mean, year to year, though, the healthcare costs were up substantially, year over year. And I don't see that trend. I don't see anything concrete to indicate that trend, whether in health or families or some of the other big departments, is reversing, because your path to balance had you keeping spending at 2% or growth per year, and you're exceeding that every year.
Well, again, this year for Q1, what we're reporting in terms of expense variance is just related to wildfires. So right now, we continue to do really important work in health, and I think our minister responsible for health, seniors, and long-term care is doing a great job leading that work of ensuring that we're continuing to invest in the things that matter, again, improving healthcare services for Manitobans while we manage that expense track. And, the outlook for this year, again, right now, is that we're continuing to say that we're on budget. And we're going to continue to focus on ensuring that as we go forward, next fiscal and in the following, that we continue to follow a track that allows us to deliver on that balanced budget commitment.
Minister, if you recall on Budget Day 2024, we questioned the optimistic growth projections for that fiscal year. You take away the tobacco settlement, and your revenue was up maybe $100 million, $150 million. You didn't meet even the modest conference board projections for growth. What makes you think these future very, very optimistic growth projections are going to hold?
Well, I think what we've seen here is that we are starting to see some impacts from the tariffs, and I think this does show that. We had projected in our last budget a 1.7% GDP growth estimate for this year. We're now coming back to you to say that it's looking like it's more like 1.2%. But again, the potential downside there that we identified in budget was as much as 3.8% in a worst-case tariff scenario. And so what we're seeing is Manitoba weathering the storm. And I think that our economy remains a strong, diverse economy. And I think we're showing that there's a lot of hope and optimism in this province.
Now, let's talk about 24-25. And staying on 24-25, the department with the biggest percentage jump here and the biggest actual jump is families. Up $745 million. That's a, forgive me, 35% budget increase. What caused families to go so far over budget?
Yeah, and so that pertains to contingent liabilities. And I can't speak about those anymore or any further than that, but I can say that those are unexpected liabilities that we were required to record after our Q3 report out to Manitobans.
Can you explain to me why you can't say what they were?
Again, this is something that I'm not able to dig into, but we can say that there were significant contingent liabilities that needed to be recorded after our Q3 report out to Manitobans. So this was an unexpected event. Yes, contingent legal liabilities. So this is an unexpected event, along with the requirement to accrue those tobacco revenues last fiscal. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, had those two events not occurred, we would have seen a net improvement to our deficit last fiscal.
I'm going to ask you, forgive me, and maybe this, I understand you don't comment on court cases, but what percentage of $745 million, or what proportion rather, how many millions was this contingent legal liability that you can't discuss?
I can't speak to the details of it, but I can say that a vast proportion of that is tied to contingent liabilities.
I think I can. It is fair for me to ask you what was just department overage.
This is not pertaining to departmental overages. This pertains to the contingent liability.
I'll ask one more time.
Please.
Of the 745, how much of it was nothing to do with the liability?
Again, that amount that we're seeing in families is not tied to operational variances there. This is tied to, for the most part, significant contingent liabilities that we were required to accrue in last fiscal.
So the most part, and the lesser part that was related to the department was what number?
Well, Again, so the overall balance here is that we were required to record significant contingent liabilities, much of which you're seeing reflected in the families line there. I can't get into any further details, but all we can say again is that had that not been come forward, along with the tobacco settlement, we would have in the end seen a net improvement to our deficit position.
Can you say if that department would have been under or over budget without this legal thing that you're not allowed to talk about?
They would have been relatively close to the budget target.
The tobacco settlement money coming in is also, at least in this amount, the 846 is a one-time thing. You mentioned you're expecting some ongoing payments. They won't be that large given the province's overall share of the outcome. So again, how do you, given that wildfire costs are a one-time expense, but the tobacco settlement at this rate is a one-time income, how do you get to balanced budget?
Well, as we said earlier, that this work how we're going to do it is going to come down to good planning. We've done a lot of multi-year planning work that I think is paying dividends. Ultimately, that will result in us ensuring that revenues match up with expenses in our balance year. And as we move forward into this upcoming budgeting year, and when we bring that budget to Manitobans, it will make clear the financial targets that have been given to departments, and will show the path forward as to how we're going to deliver on that.
Two of the credit rating agencies have mentioned revenue levers and revenue options. What kind of tax increase or fee increase, there are other avenues, fees for example, are you looking at to help you get to balance?
Well, I want to thank you, first of all, Steve, for highlighting the recent reaffirmation of our credit rating from Moody's and the stable outlook that they offered Manitoba. I think that was a really great commentary on their positive view of our fiscal management and approach. But again, right now, we're not looking at any of those additional fees or looking at those options. Right now, we're focused on continuing to, again, make sure that at the end of the day, we manage expenses in a good way so that they align with revenues in our final balance year. And ultimately, we're going to continue to focus on fiscal sustainability. And I think one important piece that I want to add to that is that beyond just that important planning work that we're doing, I think we're going to be adding to that through the vision that the Premier outlined yesterday at the economic development announcement that we saw, where he outlined a vision for the province where we're going to focus on making Manitoba a have province by 2040. We're really excited about Churchill and what that presents as an opportunity for a significant boost, turbo boost to our provincial economy. And when you pair that with a lot of the important investments and announcements that we've made, for example, the largest capital plan in our province's history, $3.7 billion we announced in budget, paired with reductions to interprovincial trade barriers and other important moves, I think we're going to see, a very hopeful view for the future. And we're continuing to do the work of expanding the economy and again, making sure we deliver on those commitments.
Can we go to Zoom quickly?
Sure.
Thank you. We have two reporters on Zoom. We'll start with Alex Lambert from the Brandon Sun. One question, one follow-up, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you. How much is covering costs incurred by school divisions taking in evacuees expected to cost?
I don't have that specific detail, but we're happy to follow up offline.
What costs can you see related to evacuees in the rural parts of the province coming up that haven't already been attached to that $179 million?
Well, I would just say that overall, we're showing today about $179 million in expenditures relating to supporting Manitobans through this challenging time. That is a significant investment. Again, we are expecting that number to go higher because the wildfire season unfortunately does continue to impact us. But I think we've been clear that we're sparing no expense in investing in making sure that we take care of Manitobans through this challenging period. That was priority number one. And we know that the wildfires have had a significant impact on Manitobans across the province. And I think we responded in kind. We're seeing the cost of that, again, estimated $179 million impact, but that will be offset through revenues we'll be obtaining through the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, and we'll reflect that later when we come back to Manitobans with a future fiscal update.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Now moving to CTV, Jeff Keel. One question, one follow-up.
Oh, hi, Minister. You'd mentioned the budget will have targets for departments.
Can you give us an idea what that will be? Will it be, departments you must cut spending by X amount and by how much, kind of like what the feds are doing?
Well, the targets I referenced are the targets that we'll be setting through the estimates and budgeting process. And then, of course, where those budget lines land will be reflected in our upcoming budget, where Manitobans will have a chance to see essentially where departments landed in terms of their upcoming year's expenditure targets. So again, the work of getting to balance involves multi-year planning, ensuring that each department is clear on their role in helping us deliver on that. And we're going to sort through that as we work through the estimates process this year.
And just lastly on the DFA, of the 179 million and counting, because the Premier did say yesterday the invoices are still coming in. Do you have a number, a percentage, an idea of what you expect the feds to cover of that number?
The DFA has some specific criteria, parameters, and so we do have a sense of what we can expect. But again, we'll come back to Manitobans with clarity on what those revenues will look like at a later update. But we will be booking those revenues in this fiscal. So we do expect that while we are seeing significant fiscal impacts resulting from those wildfire expenditures, they will be offset through revenues this year.
And that concludes the questions on Zoom. Thank you.
In terms of targets, are we going to see across the board targets of 5%, 10%, 20% in staff or money, or what are we going to see you issue specific across the board targets or departmental specific targets?
Well, this will be part of our budgeting and estimates process. So as we move forward, and we've done a multi-year planning exercise, departments are given clarity on what targets they're required to deliver on in the coming years. And so as part of that, departments will go away, they'll do their work, and ultimately where that lands, that will be manifest on budget day when we get to next year's budget.
I'll ask it a different way. Would you rule out specific targets in terms of FTEs or dollars?
Look, the only thing we're focused on is ensuring we deliver on that balanced budget commitment. And so that will manifest in terms of targets, that will result in departments, setting budget numbers next year that will ensure we deliver on that.
The reason I ask is, while in opposition, you were critical of that mechanism used by the Pallister government in particular.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of really terribly negative impacts that we saw from the former government, and we saw the number of cuts that they made, the way that impacted Manitobans. We're focused again on ensuring both fiscal sustainability and responsibility while we continue to invest. And I think the former government seemed to just focus on hacking and slashing.
Okay, so how do you fix healthcare while setting targets for saving money?
Well, again, I point to that $90 million example that we offered. So we had at Q3 come to Manitobans and we shared a certain number in terms of a health overage last year. What we saw was a $90 million reduction from that number that we reported. What happened since then? There was some good work that occurred. I can speak to two key areas. One was there was some improved management of non-clinical expenses in health. So that ultimately is reductions in bureaucratic costs. We also saw some savings resulting from improved procurement processes. And so there was previously maybe more of a focus on one-off purchases, and they've shifted to more contractual purchasing. So those are two key drivers of those savings. Good management. So I think that's reflective of the work that we did last year, and I think that's a reflection of what we need to do going forward again, which is in a context of making investments, making sure that at the same time we focus on that fiscal target.
At the risk of sounding glib about a serious issue, do you think people sitting waiting for a medicine bed days in a ER department are care about procurement improvements? Manitobans largely aren't seeing the sort of retail kind of improvements, and I mean their actual experiences with the ER wait times. They're not seeing the healthcare fix. I understand you're the finance minister, but it seems to be, if the solution is more staffing for medicine beds, that costs a lot of money, yet you're setting the target here. So how do you pull on both levers at the same time and steer the ship in the right direction?
Well, I think we've seen significant improvements to healthcare access for Manitobans through investments in new clinics. I think about all those new clinics that we've opened, the extended hours clinics, and also significant increases in the number of healthcare staff we have supporting Manitobans. I think 280 new doctors, 3,000 overall net new healthcare staff supporting us, making sure we can get the healthcare supports we need when we need them. I think that's major progress. And again, that's really turning a big ship around. The former government left our healthcare system in a very bad shape. and ultimately our healthcare minister and premier, I think, are doing really important work of moving us forward. There is more work to do, but we are certainly seeing significant improvements and lifts to the number of staff, which was a major commitment we made, and we're seeing real success on that front.
And I mean, forgive us for being a bit skeptical, but on the expense side, the expenses have gone well beyond what you laid out in your first budget's multi-year plan to get to balance. And we've asked repeatedly, including earlier this morning, about what concrete or things are you doing to keep spending in line in order to help you achieve balance? And you talk about multi-year planning and internal planning, but you still haven't pointed to something concrete and said, this is what we're doing to control spending, which could be anything like a hiring freeze, a wage freeze, something that would control a big part of your expenditures.
Well, again, the Q1 report doesn't show any variance from expenditures other than really on wildfires. So the budget itself, to date, what we're reporting to Manitobans is that we're effectively almost keeping to what we said we would be keeping to on expenditures in budget. So we're not showing those expenditures sort of moving. We're not seeing increases in pressures there, again, other than mainly in that wildfire area. Other than that, we've clearly articulated in budget what we expect to see as the fiscal track out to our final year of our mandate. And I think that shows the way. And now it comes down to the important work, again, through that multi-year budgeting and planning exercises that we've been doing to ensure that departments know the mission and that ultimately they help us to deliver on that target that we outlined in budget.
Moody's is forecasting a deficit in the current year of 1.9 billion, matching sort of the worst case scenario in your tariff budget. But you're saying that's not true because the economic impact so far has not been as bad?
Well, our Q1 report out, I think, summarizes where we're thinking this year is going. And ultimately, right now, the major impacts that are showing a divergence from what we reported at budget is stemming from wildfires. And again, some of the impacts of the drought, which we're seeing in that hydro number.
If we're not really on the track to balance in the first term, should civil servants and Manitobans be prepared for some serious cuts in the next 2 years to get there? I mean, if the government is, dedicated, committed to going to balance, if hydro has another bad year, if there's more forest fires, if there's no more new tranches of massive tobacco money.
What Manitobans can expect from us is this continued effective balancing that we've been doing, which is showing that we can both be fiscally responsible while we continue to invest. And I think we're showing that over and over. And again, I think that I've pointed to that $90 million reduction as an example of that. I think that shows the work that we're doing, that we can both find ways of reducing costs while we continue to invest in the things that matter.
Minister, Hydro's finished their year end. They often finish it before you guys to complete it. It's not out yet. You mentioned Hydro is projecting a bigger thing, but I'm sure you've seen the booklet that is presumably printed up that we're going to see later today. So will you please share us Hydro's year-end profit and loss, like net bottom line right now?
Yes.
Spare us the forgive me, the weight.
So we continue to expect more variability when it comes to hydro. And so what we're reporting today is what hydro's reporting at Q1. But again, because we are focused on ensuring transparency, hydro is also stating that they're expecting that at the end of the year, we will be in a net loss position. What that is exactly at this point, we don't know. But right now, we're reporting what hydro's sharing as Q1. And so due to the drought, we are expecting some worsening. And we're being clear with that. And I think that's pretty distinct from what we saw from the former government.
Sorry, Hydro's 2024-25 fiscal is not out yet today. It's supposed to come out later today, I'm told.
Yeah.
Why can't we know right here? You're choosing to have this news conference before that. Presumably that document is passed you for approval. I don't believe that is a ridiculous supposition on my part. Will you please share what Hydro's loss was for 24-25?
Well, what you can expect is essentially what, anything shared will be aligned to what I'm sharing with you today, again, which is the Q1 number that Hydro has offered us as government and that they'll be reporting out. Again, that number reflects some softening in their projections due to the drought that we're facing. But again, we're here being transparent about that, and we're wanting to make sure that Manitobans do have a lens on what's coming there.
Why not share the 24-25 number? That's for a fiscal year that ended on March 31st. So that's well before.
63 million.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well then, forgive me, it's a big document. We didn't have quite the time to read it before
We're
this.
not given advance copies, which is
Yeah, okay,
unusual.
so we don't.
Something that we'd like addressed in the future,
Okay.
so that we could ask
More
more intelligent questions, having consumed, having digested it before
Yes.
answering questions.
Forgive me, thank you for that.
They're projecting a $38 million change from whatever revenue was in the budget, 38 million negative change from whatever was in the budget, to reflect a very dry year. That's relatively small. Do you expect that number to grow, given how long the drought has lasted and how extensive it was this year?
So they are reporting a $38 million negative variance. But again, we're being transparent and saying that Hydro is also expecting that at the end of the year, we will likely be in a net loss position. So we are expecting more negative variance there. The degree to which that we'll see a negative variance is yet to be determined. Again, we've still got some more time ahead of us here in terms of a rain season. I do continue to hope for lots of rain. But at this point, again, we are being transparent with Manitobans about that possibility.
I'm going to take another stab at this. In 2 years, you're going to go from a $1.1 billion deficit to zero deficit, perhaps even a small surplus, or at least table such a plan before calling an election. How do you eliminate $1.1 billion in red ink in 2 years?
Well, actually, so in this budget, we reported a $794 million deficit. And so it would be two budgets from there.
Okay. 794. So how do you chip away at 800 million when you're not going to get as much tobacco money, nearly as much tobacco money next year?
Well, again, I'm happy to sort of share again the focus that we're going to be placing on getting to a balanced budget. This is about ensuring that we look ahead and that we make a plan that will ensure that departmental expenditures align to revenues over the next two budgets. And so we've committed to doing that work, and this is a significant effort that's required to do that. When I say planning, I mean we're locked away over the summer doing planning for multiple weeks, looking ahead, looking at every variable, looking to understand what we think our cost structure is. And all of that will result in ultimately targets that will be given to departments, which will translate into numbers that you'll see at budget, which will show the path towards delivering on that balanced budget commitment in 2 years.
So you can plan your way out of an $800 million deficit. Like, I don't understand like what sort of conjuring you can do. When you started in government, we're dealing with cuts and years of the Pallister savings and lower taxes. So can you give us something? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's any tax increases. There's not going to be any job losses. There's not going to be any service cuts, and yet you're going to be on a path to balance.
Yeah, well, again, beyond just doing work and ensuring we control expenditures, we will expect to see some natural increases in revenue year over year that occur as the province continues to grow. So that's one piece of this, right? Year over year, we do see changes to federal transfers, for example. So there will be revenue increases that will be forthcoming through those federal revenue increases, as well as just economic growth in the province. And again, beyond that, I think we've already shown how we're going to do this work. The question you're asking is how are we going to reduce from an $800 million deficit to balance? Well, what we did in a very short order was we took a $2 billion deficit that the former government left to Manitobans, and we're reporting to Manitobans today that Public Accounts and our Auditor General has confirmed that we've reduced that to $1.15 billion. That's almost, I think, $850 million reduction in a single year. So that is, I think, shows the enormous progress that we're making. And I think Manitobans can see that we're making the progress that they're expecting us to make, which is both, again, reducing the size of the deficit while we continue to make important investments. So case in point, I think this year's public accounts shows how we're going to make that progress. So, and I think it's a good result.
You've had huge transfer payments, federal transfers in the last couple of years. Carney is hinting at tightening that up somehow. Don't know how the formula gets adjusted, don't know what control he would have, but Harper, something like that, and during the Sellinger years. What is your contingency for reduced help from the federal government in the event that federal transfers are nowhere near these massive events? I'm not interested in 2040 when we are a half province. I'm talking about 25, 26, and 26, 27.
So, I'm fortunate in this role to have conversations with the federal finance minister along with colleagues across the country. And I've had a chance to speak with him recently, and I asked him about what we might expect as a province in the upcoming November 4th federal budget. His answer to me was that we can expect that there should be no major changes of any kind to bilats or those transfers. So we're expecting those to hold steady. And that was the message we delivered to them, which is we're expecting consistency as we go forward. Because, of course, we have a lot of important services we're providing to Manitobans, and we need to work in collaboration with the federal government in delivering those.
Has he committed to maintaining the equalization formula through to the end of its current locked-in period, which is 2029?
Yes. He committed to sticking to what's in place right now, again, along with the other commitments and bilats.
Just going back to the tobacco payment, the first big lump sum, how much of the Manitoba's share of the settlement went to legal fees?
An estimated $29 million went towards legal costs.
And that's before the 400 and...
So total revenue we received was $846 million, and we booked $425 million in expenses. $29 million of those expenses were legal fees, and the rest were for those doubtful accounts, on the basis that we're not sure that we're going to get those tobacco payments for the full 20 years. We're counting on them coming in for the first 5, but that last 15, what we're saying is that's yet TBD, and ultimately that's reflected in that $425 million expense line. So $425 million minus $29 million for legal fees. The rest is doubtful accounts.
Does the $846 million in tobacco settlement, does that reflect the total of the 5-year expectations?
No, that's the total revenues booked in for this year. Yeah, but again, that's offset by that significant $425 million expense. So the net impact of the tobacco in that fiscal is $421 million.
So that means you're expecting like $50 million next year, like on next year's books? I ask because sometimes you can book expected revenues in advance, right? Yeah. When it becomes a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, and so we are saying that we feel that it's reasonable to assume that there'll be 5 years of payments estimated around $30 million a year. However, that's it's formula based, so it will depend on revenues for those tobacco companies. So I think we've taken a very reasonable approach to this. You can look around the country and see how various provinces have done this. Some have taken, I'd say, more aggressive approaches. We've taken, I think, a very moderate approach to accounting for those dollars.
So $846 million on this year's books, and now we're talking about accounting, and then $30 million on next year's books and in the same the following 4.
Yeah, but very important to highlight that, again, the net impact for 24-25 is only $421 million. And then going forward, an estimated $30 million a year for 5 years. And then beyond that, we're saying we're not confident or we're not sure that those dollars are coming, and that's reflected in those doubtful accounts.
So just in terms of the income, and I acknowledge there's $400 million in expenses, but in terms of the revenue from the tobacco settlement, $846 million this year, and then 50-50.
$846 million in last fiscal.
Last fiscal, sorry.
That's
and then 50, 50, 50, 50, 50.
30, 30, 30, 30, 30.
Okay.
Sorry,
Lots of details here. Don't be sorry at all.
I just want to make sure the 846 was not including portions of the 30s.
Absolutely. And it's not. It does not include portions of the 30s.
how come it's for last fiscal when the money didn't come in till we were told September?
That's because that's when the legal decision occurred. So that's why auditor generals across the country, there wasn't a lot of agreement on how this tobacco dollar should be dealt with, but one thing that there did seem to be broad agreement on was that the dollars needed to be booked in the year that that legal decision was made, which was last fiscal.
Anything else? All right, no. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.